Good morning again, and welcome back to Brighter Morning with Bo on MCTV and U97.5 FM, Hot Like Pepper, Multicultural Radio, Multicultural TV. Thank you for viewing. This is Brighter Morning with Bo, and I am Bo Tiwari. We talk now to MP for Mayaro, Mr. Rushton, Paray. Good morning, Mr. Paray. How are you?
Good. Good morning, Bo. Good morning to your listeners and television viewers. Thank you for having me.
Yes, no, we're very glad to have you. We know the budget is coming up. I know that you have a lot of other issues on the agenda in the parliament. This has been a challenging time in terms of debate. You had the Tobago election boundaries issue for debate, and you also have the issue of the Revenue Authority for debate, and on the agenda as a national discussion is the issue of property tax as well. But I won't pursue these issues unless you want to raise anything about them. What I'm more concerned about is that as we move to the budget on October 4th, what is your thinking about priorities and the need to do certain things after our experience of COVID, 6 years of economic decline, and moving forward for economic revival and ultimately recovery and growth? And I want to particularly ask you about agriculture. We had the Minister of Agriculture here recently, and we had a conversation with him. And he said some constructive things, that is true, but I can't help but feel that not enough is happening in agriculture, and that we need to do significantly more, especially since the world has seen that in a global crisis, you can have a food and hunger crisis in almost every country, because the poor are everywhere. Even in a wealthy country, they are poor. So I want to use that as the jumping off point for you, if you would like to say something about it.
Sure, absolutely. Bo, I missed the minister's interview yesterday. But what I can tell you is that if we can go back to the report that the Prime Minister had initiated at the onset of COVID-19, that was the recovery roadmap. Agriculture was one of the key modes that was identified as part of this plan. Unfortunately, and sadly, I must say, the last budget of the Minister of Finance did not address any of the proposals that were put in that recovery roadmap. Quite frankly, I think that team was disbanded and the roadmap was thrown in a bin somewhere. So I think the country has been faltering going forward, quite directionless. If you look at a lot of the activities that the government has been pursuing since the pandemic, it has been haphazard, clearly no direction. So if we were to come back to the issue of agriculture, some big issues arise that have not been addressed in the last 18 months, much less for the last 6 years. There are few things that are stifling farmers and agriculture in this country. And high on that list is the issue of the granting of leases for farmers. We still have several thousands of applications that are sitting in process. And I mean, systems in the public service was already slow to dead slow prior to COVID. And when you had all these cutbacks in staffing and so on for the COVID-19 social distancing, I mean, it has gone dormant. So I am hoping that the minister have a conversation with the finance minister. He should have had it by now, to utilize whatever machinery mechanism. I think only about 10% of the allocation of that $500 million that was allocated sitting in the Ministry of Finance, that would have been sent to the Ministry of Agriculture on demand. I think only about 10 or 15% of that may have been used for the food basket program through NAMDEFCO to help during the pandemic. I'm hoping that the minister would have asked the finance minister to release some of that funds to look after that major issue of lease land. But if I were to take you back to 2013, 14, somewhere around there was an IDB project that was funded by the IDB, where the Ministry of Agriculture was able to bring all arms of that leasing arrangement, the legal, the surveying team, as a subcommittee. And within, I think it was 6 months, the project lasted. And but within that 6 months, it is my understanding that over 1,000 leases were completed and issued to farmers. And as soon as the funding was done, the team was disbanded. And I thought that was such a sad thing, that you had a system, you had a methodology that was delivering on leases to farmers, and you disbanded it, and you didn't find the opportunity to get money from other allocations to continue that team. And because of these leases, farmers have an issue of capitalization. And that leads to an issue of lack of funding. Farmers are depending on their incentive returns as well. You have farmers who are buying retail to create their goods, but they have to sell wholesale. And that is a huge disadvantage to the farmers as well. So, unless a couple of those main issues are addressed in this year's budget, getting the farmers going to do their part in terms of our post COVID 19 recovery, it is going to continue to be difficult for them.
Okay, now you've raised many issues there, but the big issue here for us nationally is that we have a significant food import bill approaching, well, around $6 billion, nearly $7. And it's not going down. And the only way it can go down is if we import less. And the only way we can import less is if we produce more of the things that we need, because a significant part of what we import is food. And as I said, the food import bill is pretty high. You raised the issue of land tenure. I know that personally because I was an MP before, and in Caroni Central, where I was, I sent hundreds of, we did all the processing in the MP's office, and we sent hundreds of requests for resolving the land tenure issue for people in the community. I don't think any of those have been addressed. And as you say, without land, you can't go to the bank, you can't sell, you can't really get a loan. It's very, very hard for the farmers, and it is something that needs to be addressed. But let us address this issue. I want to be fair in this. I want to acknowledge the $500 million that the minister put in the last budget for agriculture. I also want to acknowledge that he made agriculture a tax-free industry. Both of those are good things, making agriculture tax-free. And secondly, putting the money in is important, but allocation is one thing, disbursement is another. And in talking about that $500 million, which I suppose is going to carry over into this budget, the Minister of Agriculture said that what they were thinking of doing is that they wanted to supplement the traditional agriculture with traditional agriculture of the farming community by getting the state involved. They have some arrangement unannounced so far in elaborated terms, the minister mentioned it, between China and the government of China, government of Trinidad and Tobago. And they want to bring young people into farming, and they want to use various forms of technology in these things. And he mentioned that they wanted to establish 4 greenhouses in different parts of the country, etc., to have controlled agriculture. Now, what I want to ask you is this. Do you favor state involvement, continued involvement in agriculture beyond the facilitation of a government-to-government arrangements, which then makes it possible for private people to be involved? Or do you think that things should be done, like making agriculture tax-free, creating the incentives, etc., for private investment to go into agriculture?
Okay, so Bo, there's 2 things there. I by nature, I do believe that the state must have an initial role in any part of the development of the country, but private sector must be incentivized to move forward. So for instance, look at what's happening, throughout the Caribbean. I think Caribbean businessmen are, in a sense, we're not risk takers. So we wait for the state to put out certain things there, and when we feel comfortable that it is running, then we are incentivized to dive in and go forward with it. State involvement cannot continue in any large way in the agricultural sector. However, the incentivization of getting private sector involved must happen. But Bo, you talked about the $500 million. You spoke about, in credit to, I would say, the last 2 administrations, that they've made agriculture tax-free, they've opened up a lot of things. But we're still suffering from the human element, Bo. To get things processed, it takes too long. To get a farmer's ID card, it is ridiculously long. You can't blame the minister for that. It's a human process that we haven't figured out how to deliver these items. On the issue of young people and modernization technology requirements for greenhouses, if we look at what's happening in Holland, Holland is one of the smaller states in Europe, but they have over 200,000 greenhouses producing over 200 million pounds of vegetables. And they are one of the largest exporters of vegetables in the world. So it is not impossible for us to do that. And a smart government would connect agriculture to our tertiary education. I always say, if you are graduating from the University of the West Indies with a BSc in agriculture, part of your certificate should be a deed for 5 acres of land somewhere. Why am I going to train a batch of young people with great ideas? They have a different worldview. Graduate them in agriculture or agricultural sciences, but they have to go home and either beg for a piece of land to do something, or get family or ancestral land that may be tied up with the state as well. So there are a few businesses that I do know right now that is investing heavily in these smart technologies. I can tell you one that's happening in Point Lisas that I have visited, that they are pushing forward with the vertical farming. There's a project that is called, where I can't remember the name offhand, but basically, rather than import the fruit, you import the climate.
Yeah.
And when you import the climate, you can produce these fruits and vegetables. Even some of the imported vegetables like broccoli and so on, which we have a good appetite for.
It's being done very strategically by young entrepreneurs. Yes, of course.
So it's happening. How do we get this to push forward as a part of national development to get more people on board. And that solves two problems. If we go into that method in controlled environments, we have less dependency on land. We have a lower threshold for the consumption of water. Because when you automate these processes, we can solve some of those problems. But it requires massive investments. It requires some subsidies initially from the state. I think Ansa Makal is rearing or getting ready to do some projects in Tobago with regards to some fruits, berries, strawberries, raspberries, all those kind of things. It's happening. So we need to continue pushing this. I am hoping when the budget is read in October, agriculture should not get one page of a 140-page budget statement. Agriculture should have about 10 pages identifying key issues, key areas to resolve, and how do we bring our graduates from UE, UTT, who are doing biochemistry, biotechnology, how do we get them in greenhouses to produce? And one thing before I finish this topic, Bo, it's a segue into what's happening with trade. Because as you may be aware, containers, a container that would have cost a vendor in Trinidad about 4,000 US to come from China or from Canada, you are now paying between $18,000 and $20,000 for a container. That's just the rental of the container to get it to Trinidad. So when you look at the cost of construction material, food items, I see people on Facebook every day complaining that the price of food has skyrocketed. And it is because of the increased charges in containers. Now, if we keep importing food at that threshold of over nearly 6 billion TT dollars, and we do nothing about it over the next fiscal year, that 6 billion is going to go to 7 billion. And we do not have that money right now. So it is critical that we focus on this agricultural driven type of technology to bring more people into more of the workforce into agriculture. And we should start seeing some improvement in the delivery in the sector.
Yeah, so unequivocally, you are saying agriculture centerpiece of the productive development side of the 2022 budget.
Yes, and I mean, I have no doubt that the Minister of Agriculture has, I have spoken to him on several occasions, I think he has a clear idea of what he wants to do. I do feel he's hampered by the availability of funding or the accessibility of funding. I think he is stymied a bit by the public service and the systems in the public service to drive the kind of projects that he wants in the time frame that he wants to do it. So those are the things that he as Minister of Government must sit with his cabinet colleagues and say, well, look, the failure of the Ministry of Trade to improve our ease of doing business is affecting the foreign direct investment that perhaps we could get in agriculture. So, I mean, he has a duty to work with his colleagues to solve some of the key issues that he can't attend to.
We'll get to that in a minute. You know, yesterday I spoke to Professor Wayne Ganpat. He is to be Dean of the Faculty of Agriculture. He's a very knowledgeable man. He has written about this and he has done things in the agricultural department there that are of some significance. But what became clear is that there is very little connectivity between the knowledge side of agricultural research and applications, the Ministry of Agriculture, which is responsible for policy and facilitation of execution, the investment side of agriculture, which is critical, and then the farming, the traditional farming community. And what he was telling me is that, look, we should forget about land in relation to agriculture. Some of that is important. For instance, it is important to take the best land and make the most out of it. But he said, by and large, with the technologies available, all you need is some space. And if you can deal with solar energy and rainwater harvesting, each one of these production systems is self-sufficient sustaining, self-sustainable, self-sufficient. And what it requires is not just, policy. It's not just the Ministry of Agriculture talking about what it should do and what it shouldn't do. It really is some thought, some strategy, some action. You've got to decide who are the people who are producing. You've got to know them, etc. And you've got to make it possible for them to produce with a system that works to make agriculture profitable. And that same system that is addressing the issue of food self-sufficiency as far as possible, because we can't produce all of our food, that same system can be the basis of exports as well as agro-processing as well, just as they are doing in Holland. But why can't we be smart about it? What is wrong?
But I can tell you, in credit to the traditional farmers, if you look at what has happened since April or May this year with the NAMDEFCO program, I think our local farmers have been able to deliver, I would say, probably a little under 2 million pounds of vegetables for that program.
Yeah, they have
So
really,
they stepped up.
they've stepped up.
And
Yes.
I've looked at some data in terms of employment in the agricultural sector. And because of the COVID-19 and how SMEs were impacted, bars were closed, some of these businesses in the informal sector, there was a movement of people across agriculture. So, I mean, it must dawn on administrators and policymakers in this country that we have the capacity, we have the manpower, we have the people. Let us work on the psyche and the technology. And Trinidad and Tobago could be a main driver for the entire Caribbean in food production, because our traditional farmers stepped up over the last couple of months and they have told the state, we can deliver, help us do more. And I think the minister acknowledges that in conversations with him. And I'm really hoping that he can push and drive that sector with whatever he's getting in this fiscal year in the budget.
Well, he talked about what the farmers had done in terms of making produce available for the distribution, so to literally thousands of families in the country, in every constituency. So there's no question that the production system works in spite of all the difficulties and challenges. But we've got to solve those difficulties and challenges, and we've got to have, together with traditional agriculture, smart systems of agriculture at different levels that target particular products, and then these things need to be organized and connected in some way that is meaningful. But you mentioned the issue of trade. You mentioned the ease of doing business, and this is important. We are going to talk to the Minister of Trade on Friday, and we will hear what her perspective is. But this issue of the ease of doing business, as Gabriel Farrier from the Chamber of Commerce was saying yesterday, people are fed up of hearing about this now, ease of doing business, and what an impediment it is to business and trade and productivity, efficiency, effectiveness, getting things done in the society, and ultimately to investment, because people are not going to take their money and put it in a place where everything is a hassle. All right? Why can't we, after all of these years, get the ease of business elements done and together? And we are talking about digitalization. I don't see anything happening on that front. I would think that that would be an essential requirement. All right? I mean, what do you think should be done here? Let's take the issue of agriculture and link it to the business of internal organization and export trade in agro-processing. What do we need to do? And the investment that is required for that. Because if you have more production, you're going to need more investment in agro-processing.
But normally people will ask me, MP, why have we not changed or improved in a lot of things over the last few years, probably last decade or two? And I would normally tell them that we are a 19th century or a 20th century parliamentary system trying to service a 21st century demand, because our constituents, our citizens, they are online, they're on the internet, they are seeing what's happening in other parts of the world. But our public service is governed by a 1960 Civil Service Code. So there is a serious disconnect up front. You ask, why haven't we been able to fix some of these issues that keep us at 105 on the ease of doing business index? And it is because, and I always say, I sit at Joint Select Committee meetings, and I am at pain to listen to our public servants, hardworking as they are, but they are constrained under Regulation 10, 12, 15, 25, 30, and they are penalized if they try to operate in a sensible way that doesn't conform to the regulation. So they become a bit constrained and coward in acting. And I think those are the issues we have to address in terms of our civil service regulations, to give more of our public servants, the leaders in these organizations, the ability to switch and change and maneuver to fix problems. If you were to look at some countries that I've done some research in, how did they get over this problem? They set up tribunals and they got their municipal corporation to form joint committees,
How many
like for
minutes
building,
the
for electricity. They were able to, deal with these issues and move from 100 days in some issues to 10 days and 12 days. So it is not irreparable, but I think it's linked to our processes and systems that we must address through legislation to start with,
no,
and then through internal process change.
well, my take is that COVID has taken us past the time where we can say, let us try and fix customs, let us try and fix the relationship between the Ministry of Planning and the Ministry of Trade. Let us try and fix the relationship between InvestTT and the government institutions and the institution responsibility for environmental approvals and all of these things. I think COVID has taken us past that and basically said to us, either you have smart government and smart business and a smart economy, or lie down and die. I feel we've reached that point. And I hope the Minister of Finance and the Cabinet and the government and the Prime Minister understand that simple truth about the impact of COVID on the consciousness of the world and the demand for systems that make quantum leaps into the future. We cannot have incremental interventions in these matters anymore. Anyway, I want to show you two short clips, one of flooding, which is directly related to the issue of agriculture and agricultural production. And I want to show you a little clip on industry, because the two issues are, if you grow more food and you have more productive capability there, we're going to save foreign exchange. And if you export more, we are going to make up for some of the deficiencies in foreign exchange loss in the energy sector. So let us look at those two clips and I'll have you comment as we come to the end. Yeah? Okay, look at this. Can you imagine if you plant, look at the homes. Can you imagine if you plant some food somewhere there and the flood comes, what happens to it? You know, and this is an annual occurrence. it is predictable in the sense that you know that if rain falls, you're going to get this. And you know that there are reasons why this happens. Okay, look at the fellas swimming in it. I think they're trying to save somebody who probably cannot swim. This is an amazing phenomenon. I mean, this is what you're dealing with in Trinidad and Tobago. And this is not a flood like you had in Germany, or it's a child they were saving, where it happens once in a lifetime or once in 3 decades because of climate change. There's an annual occurrence. You go back to any year, and this is a factor, it's just getting worse because of climate change. Let's go to the manufacture now. All right, this is everything, a production system here. And basically, the manufacturing sector is critical for our ability to export more and to be able to earn foreign exchange. All right, so there are lots of things that we have to do. We have to deal with this climate change issue and be more sustainable. We have to deal with this flood issue to deal with the issue of managing production. And we also have to deal with the issue of, and here you have robotic elements in the manufacturing sector. So we've got to deal with the technology in the manufacturing sector. We've got to export more. We've got to get more markets. And the competition is going to be a lot stiffer for countries such as ours that are having so many difficulties. You want to make a final comment on these 2 clips and their relationship to the developmental issues involving agricultural production and trade as we go to the news, Rushton?
Both your 2 clips could, take an entire program to connect the dots there.
Yes.
But all I can tell you is that the issue of flooding, it is 50% a human issue and 50% climate change. I think as a small island that where tides govern where the water goes, we need to put the water somewhere whenever it comes in such velocity and abundance. So that means we need to have a comprehensive drainage catchment program throughout the entire country. Now, I don't think we may be able to solve flooding, but we can reduce, rather than having 8 and 10 feet of water under your home, it might go down to 24 inches if we be a little smarter. But let's talk quickly about, the issue of the manufacturing. I am aware we have a huge labor issue in the manufacturing sector, right? But we haven't had the ability, because of poor state policy, to bring in that 100,000 Venezuelans that are in the country. How do we use that labor in that industry to boost production? I think Chan had a beautiful article a couple days ago giving some advice to the minister of what they would like to see. And I do hope that the minister takes a look at some of those things that they were talking about, because we need them to continue to boost production. And as you're on the issue of climate change, one thing I didn't hear neither the Minister of Agriculture or the Minister of Finance address at any time is how are we going to adjust agriculture to look at more resilient type of crops, ones that would be more resilient in hotter temperatures, some crops that may be able to survive a minimal flood. Those things are going to impact us.
And the answers to those questions are at the University of the West Indies. We had faculty members who came here and talked about those things and how the science and the technology can make a difference to the production system. Anyway, Rushton, I want to thank you for coming on the program. We have to go now. We break for the news with Chanel Al-Sirand, who will read the news. And I am Bo Tiwari. This is Brighter Morning with Bo on MCTV and U97.5 FM, Hot Like Pepper, Multicultural Radio.